Very good question. If hip-hop culture is a culture or not. In my opinion, it definitely is. Because it doesn't miss anything that a culture needs. Well, first of all, if you break down the word culture, the main word in culture is cult. Now, we cultivate ourselves every day with whatever it is, you see. But also within this culture, we have the social contact that we need in order to grow. We are building things together, we construct, everything is there. So the whole social aspect is still the most important thing within this culture in order to get along. So in my opinion, yeah, definitely we are a culture with all the different art forms, and we eat together, we have fun together, we are sad together, with all the aspects in life that we have. I have to start somehow different than most of the people probably expect. When you look at my b-boy history or my hip-hop history, you have to understand, well, first of all, I'm German. And as being a German and growing up in somehow like, yeah, it's, you know, like 30 years after the war, 25 years after the war, that's when I'm born. So you see that the way I grew up, we were questioning everything our parents, our grandparents, and our grand-grandparents did, you know, in their past, and we were questioning their lifestyle and our culture, you know. So growing up as a German, we were definitely looking for an identity. Now that's something very important when you think about that everything that was German was just purely wrong and bad. Everything you heard about Germany was bad. Yeah? So every time, you know, like somebody mentions something like, let's say Volkswagen, then you realize, oh shit, Hitler made the first Volkswagen, you know, the Beetle. Then you find out about, like, let's say Thyssen, big industry. Oh, they were building the weapons. All right, then you find out about this, about that, and everything was connected to the war and just to all the bad things. Even our flippin' school system that we had was very Prussian. You know, so you just try to look for a different identity and you don't want to be part of this. So when hip-hop came along, it was the best thing that could happen to us. So it was from a different perspective. Everywhere else on the planet, you had the minorities who were jumping on hip-hop. In Germany, it was also all the Germans that jumped on hip-hop because we were looking for an identity. We tried to get away from all the bullshit that, you know, like, that we were confronted with every day in the media. Every week there was an anti-war film, there was a documentary about Hitler, Nazi government, and so on and how fucked up the Germans were. But we knew we didn't have anything to do with it. So when hip-hop came along, we jumped on it, we adopted it, and to us it was very, very important to be connected with the world. And we showed the world how beautiful the world is, with its versatility, with all the differences that people are having, with all the yin and the yang. You see? So for us, my social context, to finally answer the question, my social context or our social context, the way it was always very international, and that was one of the main things. For us, the diversity that was in hip-hop, and to hang out with Turkish people, to hang out with Jewish people, and I don't know, have a celebration on the Sabbath, to I don't know, to meet other people from other cultures in other countries, or invite people in your country and see them, you know, like in your house, and you hang out with them, finding out more about it and finding out more about their life was for me actually, I think, in the beginning, I thought it was just a nice side effect, but then with the time I really found out that that's really what I'm interested in. You know, and this diversity is what hip-hop always had as an advantage, because, you know, it was politicians who drew the border, who said, like, okay, this is Poland, this is Germany, this is Switzerland, this is Germany, it's all politicians. In hip-hop, we never had those borders. We never did. Only with some of the competitions that we have now. You know, say, okay, this is the French team, that's the German team, that's the Italian team. Like for us back in the days, even our crew, Battle Squad, we were always a multinational group. You know, so for us, those borders didn't exist. And as, you know, once again, the social context, for me, when I went to those jams, when I went to those championships, it was just like, you know, You know, you're practicing all this time with your boys. You hang out with them, social context, right? It was like you work together, you have fun together at the same time, blood, sweat and tears. You know, it's like you get hurt, they get hurt with you. It's not like when you get hurt, the whole group suffers, right? So you have to stick together. Now you go into an event, and usually at those events, you think it's all about winning. And then you realize what you remember about all those events is all the people that you met. You know, you don't care whether you got first place, second place, or whatever. It's the people that you meet. It's, you know, the food that you're eating, everybody around one table. Sometimes there wasn't even a table, and everybody just got a flippin' hot dog, and you had to eat on the floor. Things like that, you know, but those are the things that really get you together. You know, like, it glues you together within the community because you share everything with each other. That was the social context back then. I know a lot of things have changed ever since hip-hop, you know, like, is more or less apparent on internet, yeah? But still, I think if you really want to get the right taste, you have to travel and you have to stick with your people, and hip-hop is still an environmental thing, which means that actually you build with your people in your environment, and from there you go. From the neighborhood to the city, from the city to the region, then you become the national king, after that you become the European king, and then you become the worldwide king, whatever you may call it, if you see what I mean. All the time, my influences, the influences that I had, they came from everywhere. In the beginning, of course, you know, like we were looking mainly at people from New York, but also people from my environment. When they came up with the movement and it looked good, or we liked it or something, we all grabbed it, or we said, oh, let's make a choreography and let's put that move in the choreography. So we all learned it and we grew from that. Also, those things have happened everywhere. That's why Paris had a certain style in the days. That's why Copenhagen, when you went there, you knew what guys in Copenhagen, how they were dancing. And if you saw somebody from Copenhagen in Frankfurt at a jam, you look at them and you're like, yo, you got family in Copenhagen? You know what I mean? You've seen it. You've seen it. Switzerland had its own style. Italy had its own style. Okay. And you know, there were always people from a certain country where you could see they had influence on everybody. You know, we don't know where, you know, we know where the source is coming from, that everything came from New York at some point, but you see like little differences in the handwriting of each dancer, you know, like change the whole thing, change the whole game after a while. And I think that's something, it's a bit of a shame that is almost missing now, because once somebody's there and he's developing just the smallest thing, if he's bringing out a YouTube trailer and the video is all over the world, then that particular thing goes all over the world right away. So those regional differences, they're not really there anymore. There still is identity, but it's much more of a personal identity now than it is a community identity. You still have single people that are sticking out, but those single people, they have the influence not so much anymore from their own environment so much, but within their environment, they look at videos from Korea, they look at videos from here, from there, and then they get a glimpse from everywhere. So you can't really say anymore where they got their stuff from. You can still recognize group by group, but mainly group by group. It's not like that anymore that I'm coming like from. I remember like back in the days when I went to La Coupole Bien for the first time, you know, jazzy rockers, they had a certain style. Nobody in Europe was dancing like jazzy rockers, and that was due to, mainly what I saw, due to two people, Eduzi and Zed, and they were like, Zed still, to me he was like, for a long time, he was the style king in Switzerland. Okay. And he really like, in Switzerland, most of the people, every time I saw something, I realized it came from Zed. It's a bit hard for me to really talk about my family and my family life. I mean, most of the guys, when you see what B-boys are doing, it's very self-destructive, you know? Yeah. Especially, you know, since most of us, since we learned self-taught, you know, like all the injuries we had, all the situations that we put ourselves into, and we continued practicing, dancing, and so on, and with all the drama we had, and so on and on. To me, dance really has been an outlet, you know, for all the drama that I had in my life. Every time, you know, there was drama going on, even in later years, you know, when I had problems with my girl or something, you know, like I went to practice just to let it out, and it always worked. You know, even today, still, you know, sometimes if I haven't been dancing for a week, you know, my wife, she says like, don't you want to go to practice? You're really miserable right now, you know. So I go to practice and everything is all right again. So she knows it's not because of her. She knows it's because I'm not happy with myself, you know, and dancing really makes me happy.
Okay.
You know, that's the main thing. That's all I can say. So of course, it had an effect on everything I did in my life. Yeah, and of course, you know, like all the side effects that I had from traveling to everything. I mean, I met my wife through dancing and all of that, you know. I think that also as dancers, we always had somehow an advantage to get closer to girls, you know, to break the ice than anybody else who was just standing at the bar and who didn't do anything, who was just watching what was happening. Sometimes, you know, like when there was a big good-looking guy on a dance floor, and he would dance with the woman, you know, of your choice, then you knew if you go to the dance floor, you boom, bah, it gives you as much power as that guy has. Okay. You know what I mean? So also it really gives you a lot of self-confidence. You know, once you know what you're doing and once you know that you're good in it, it gives you so much self-confidence, and also you learn a lot about other people. Okay. That's another thing. You learn a lot about other people, especially about jealousy, envy, you know, about people who really want to push you and want to hold you up, you know. So all of a sudden, you know, you become idols for people, you become the icon. Okay. Oh, Storm, you know, like, oh man, I always wanted to meet you. So all of a sudden, you get confronted with all these different things that you never realized, right? Okay. Just because they saw certain clips, or just because you go to a party, I don't know, you get busy, and after the party people are coming and they hug you. Wow, you just gave me the most beautiful feeling in my life. Once it happened, man, we were doing a street show in Copenhagen, just an example. We were doing a street show with Out of Control, an example. And then after the show, a guy came up, you know, he went on our stage on the street and he proposed to his woman. He said, look, you guys, you made this the most beautiful day of my life, and I want to ask you if you want to marry me. We were like, this can't be real, you know? So you realize how much you're touching other people with just something that you love so much, you know? And I guess that people are realizing it too. Yeah, absolutely.
The way you live, the way you
absolutely. And Bambada once said, you know, we can't change the world all at once, or we can't change, or one person can't just change the world. He said, but if we all contribute to it, you know, every day just a little bit, it's going to happen. And look, man, the United States, they have a black president right now. Yeah. Who thought about that 20 years ago? Serious. Nobody. You know what I mean? Yes. And part of it definitely is hip hop, you know, because hip hop made it possible.
Yeah, it has moved bigger around.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Even though it might sound funny at the end of this question, at the end of my answer, it's just, you know, where things could lead to. And I'm saying, you know, like culturally, you know, where we're at with hip hop and what we were doing with all the art forms that we're doing. Now it's appearing everywhere. If you look around you, you see graffiti everywhere in all the commercials. You see B-boys in all the music videos. Madonna is touring with B-boys and B-girls since years now. So you see all these people, they understand how much power we actually have. And out of something that just started, as you know, like the nucleus was in the South Bronx, and nobody expected that. It's worldwide. I think everybody should look for his own spot and his own position. Okay. Yeah? I'm not saying that everybody belongs on top or belongs all the way on the bottom. You choose your spot. And for the recognition, for instance, that I got, you know, I'm happy about it. This is my world, so I'm really happy about what I reached, you know. I'm always quoting Sly and the Family Stone, because he said, Sly Stone said, somebody else's medicine might be poison to you. Okay. And, well, it says it all in there, you know. I think that our art forms that are still very young. Yes. When I look at b-boy, pop and locking, nothing is written down. Really, nothing is written down, and that is a problem. Okay. I think we will get much more recognition if we really start to write down things and really document things. Okay. That still hasn't happened. You know, like we're shooting videos and all that, but there are no books. Now, if you want to get your Wikipedia site, for instance, you know, if you don't have any references as in books or as in written down things, you have a problem.
Okay.
And so, of course, you know, we're not going to get any recognition like that. But therefore, I still think that our art is pretty young. But at the same time, there's a danger because more and more theorists, people with an intellectual background, they're really interested about our culture, but they don't know nothing about it as in terms of life. So they analyze us like flipping monkeys in a cage.
Okay.
Yeah, they analyze us, they write down things about us, about, you know, like what we do, how we feel, what we think, and all of that, you know. They might take our blood to find out, you know, what blood type we are and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they don't really understand our life. That's why it's important that we have more people in this field, in the intellectual fields,
Yes.
that can talk about our culture the way it really is. That's the most important thing. So we need doctors that go to forums, to go to discussions, to panels, and so on and on, that really talk about the hip-hop culture the way it is, and not just some people who just, I don't know, blend in somewhere. We think they're part of us, but at the end of the day, you know, they're like they're like the wolf in sheep's clothes.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but there's a danger in it. For me, that's pretty easy to answer.
Okay.
When I started with all this, I was 14 years old. I was very young. I cannot really tell you how Germany functioned before hip-hop.
Okay.
You know, so just when I started with hip-hop, I was post-puberty. That's like when your life as a man starts, you know what I mean? So I can't really tell you. Before I was a child, I was doing all the things that children were doing. I didn't have any interest in politics or anything. So for me, the way I grew up, or I grew with hip-hop, you know, it became my life. So, you know, to talk about how Germany functions or how Germans were living before, can't really tell you. Also, I think that my family, you know, like the way I grew up, that my family was already different, because my family was very artistic. My mother was a gymnast.
Okay.
And she was also a very good skater, you know, like roller skating and ice skating, very good. So she was coming from an artistic field. As long as I can remember, my mother was always singing in the kitchen. Even though I had to do my homework in the kitchen, she didn't care. She was always singing out loud whenever there was a song that she could sing with. So musically as well, my father was playing the saxophone, the clarinet, the guitar. We always, you know, sometimes we had family evenings where my whole family would come together, you know, from different places. They would come, they would bring the instruments, and they would just play jazz and stuff. And we would sing along, or we would just play the Shakes or whatever, you know, because we were too little. But you see, that's already different from most of the German families. I know that most of the German families, that they're pretty stiff, and music is not really part of their life. And if music, then most of the time it's rather some classical music, you know, like from Beethoven to Bach to Wagner to whatever. You see, so
You need to be open-minded then. Music.
Open-minded to what? Well, I
music.
think that for me, you know, to grow into hip hop, it was not just a choice. It was something that was kind of like, it was given already. You know, for me to adopt hip hop, it was something. It didn't just come along and I jumped on it and I tried it. For me, when I saw breaking for the first time, I knew right away, that's me. You know what I mean? I saw it, I was like, all right. That's it. When I saw popping, same thing. I had like my whole childhood, I remember. I was dreaming about superheroes. I was dreaming, you know, like to be the $6 million man, Robocop and all these guys, you know what I mean? So the second when I saw popping, I was like,
No,
it's
that was
possible.
it.
It's possible, you know? So it was more like that. I never doubted if I could do it. For me, from the first minute, I knew I was gonna do it. I just didn't know where I was gonna end.
Okay.
You know, that's it. But coming back to like German life and how Germany or how Europe changed, I think that that due to hip hop, it definitely helped that people were getting more open-minded. It's still like a big discourse all over Europe, you know, like especially, you know, when you look at France, that people are looking at like, okay, what is really French? You can't say that anymore. With all the immigrants and everybody that comes from everywhere, they're all French, but at the same time, they're all European, and we are like a world culture now. And hip hop has been a world culture from day one. Hip hop comes from New York, hip hop comes from the Bronx, and has always been, you know, people were always involved from all over the place. New York is a melting pot itself, so even there already, it's always been international.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think in terms of being international and being global, hip-hop definitely helped. In a matter where people are getting along better with each other, hip-hop always stayed an example, and it showed that it's possible. That wherever there was a hip-hop jam, you had people of all ages, of all color, of all background, social background, you know, and also from all ethnies. So, you know, when you were getting there, sometimes you didn't know whether you were in Brazil or what is this, you know, and then you realized you were in the midst of Berlin, you know what I mean?
Okay.
So I think that's not just the advantage that we have, but also it was always a big example that we stated for everybody in public. Still, when I'm doing theater shows, same thing. When we're doing theater shows and it's announced as being like a hip-hop theater show, all of a sudden in the theater, you know, people that run the theater, they look around, they go like, wow, we never had this. And I'm asking like, what? Yeah, like, look, you know, like grandparents with grandchildren, Turks with Arabs, with Germans, with Italians, with everybody in one room and everybody celebrating what's happening on stage. It's hip-hop.
Yes.
And that's our advantage. That's the example that we stay all the time. You know, like people are always asking me, because there's a big confusion, you know, people are always talking about different aspects and the different art forms in hip hop. And you know, the original art forms were like, let's say, you know, like MCing, DJing, breaking, and what did I forget? And graffiti.
Yeah.
Yeah. So writing, you know, so even like the terms that changed, you know, sometimes they say graffiti, sometimes they say writing. Sometimes, you know, like most of the people, they know it as breakdancing, we call it Bboy, you know, because that's the real cultural name. But you see, like, and then after, you know, like beatboxing was part of it. And then there was a moment where all of a sudden, you know, like Bambaataa was talking about skating and BMX, and some people were saying about frisbee and hacky sack and all kinds of urban sports.
Yes.
That's why, you know, like now when people are asking me what are the aspects in hip hop, I really don't care about what art form you do, as long as we have peace, unity, it's love, and we're having fun. So those are the things that Bambaataa said back in the days, and also especially, you know, since nowadays, a lot of people, you know, like they see every time when somebody's starting new with hip hop right now, I see the problem is that everybody believes that the original story, the nucleus where hip hop started is more important than the 30 years of contribution and development. So right now, most of the people, when they start, because they're looking for the credibility, they go all the 30 years back and they try to go even back further. And now where they end up is at the gang life, in the gang life in New York. So they think, oh, so to be credible, I need to be part of the gang, I need to be violent, I need to be stupid. But that's not the case. Hip-hop was created at a moment where people try to get out of it. So we have to draw the line somewhere and say, no, look, this is where everything started. If we go further back, everything's going to get messed up. Yeah? So right now, all of a sudden, you have people again running around with gang vests and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting when you do the maths, when you analyze what happened back then and why this positive aspect was so overwhelming that everybody started or everybody stopped with the gang bullshit, and now they got into the positive aspects of all the stuff, you know, that also Bambaataa introduced with his block parties and so on and on. Now, but the new generation, they have to learn. There has been more than 30 years contribution and development in this culture. If they go all the way back and they think this is the foundation, it's just purely wrong. They can also start somewhere here in the center, go back and forth.
Okay.
They can learn from everybody, from everything and everybody. If they go all the way back, it's like, you want to buy a brand new car? You don't need a car. Get a horse.
Yes.
You know? You don't do this. You don't do this. You start with the car. Why was the car developed? Yeah, because, you know, horses, you know, they eat, they do a lot of dirt, you know, then they die, you gotta get a new horse. So the invention of the car, you know, it started a whole revolution. It's the same thing. You don't want to get the first car, no, you want to get a car of today, because also paradigms are changing.
Yes.
Whatever was good back then, or in the 80s, in the 90s, or in the 2000s, might not be good anymore now. You know, some of this stuff is really obsolete. You know, like just to mention a few examples in breaking, for instance. When I started breaking, the main move was a windmill. If you knew how to do a windmill, you were king, right? Like, so when you went to a hip hop jam and people were asking, oh, you're a breaker? You go like, yeah. So you know how to do a windmill? You go, yeah. Oh, so you're good. You know what I mean? So that was the answer. So and then a couple of years later, or yeah, it's not even a matter of years, like 2 years later it was all about Thomas Flares and tracks and Couronne, you know, and then a couple of years later, let's talk about a time where all of a sudden, you know, like at the end of the 90s, all of a sudden everybody was doing air flares. Everybody was doing air flares, and if you didn't know how to do an air flare, you were old school.
Yes.
You see? So and now we still hang on to this retro thing where everything from the past is getting renewed. Where we don't realize that within the paradigms that we're living in, even though we try to do something old, we are never going to be able to do it exactly the way the people did it in the past. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So we always have to do things within the context of today. Okay. Within the paradigms of today. Something might come out tomorrow and he's going to change the whole game. You know? So that's why we just got to be prepared, and we have to think about what's going to happen in the future. Is my stuff going to be obsolete?
Yes.
Or is my stuff pushing the dance further in the future, and am I contributing? That's it. And that's how it is with every art form. See, I'm still doing my own thing, and I'm still living the same way as I lived back in the days.
Yes.
The difference, the big difference for me is today we have internet, and everything goes very fast. But I think that I know how to filter things out. Internet is important to me. Mm-hmm. I've got my iPhone, you know, so every time when I'm in Germany, I've got a flat rate, of course. You know, so even like when I have like 5 minutes and I have to wait for somebody, you know, I have an appointment and somebody's coming too late, I use those 5 minutes to go online, to either, I don't know, check my email or to look at some YouTube videos, to cultivate myself, you know, to get more into things. Those things were impossible back in the days. You don't know how much time we had back in the days, and we had nothing to do. We were just hanging around, really thinking like, all right, how could this movement look like that I'm going to practice next? Now you have so much inspiration coming from everywhere that is, I always say, you know, with the abilities and the possibilities that we have today, due to internet, we have no more reason to be stupid, you know, and we have no more reason to be ignorant.
Yes.
You know, when people are misinformed or something like that, that is only because they made a choice. With every little decision that they make, like going on this side, wasting their time on that side, and so on and on. With every little decision they make to look at certain sites, whatever they read, whatever they look at, they make a choice. And if they end up stupid, it was their own choice. But if you want to be intellectual, if you really want to inform yourself about this culture, about anything, if you want to cultivate yourself, internet is the best choice.
So it's a good tool, but misused.
Yeah, it's been misused. And a lot of people these days, of course, they think that it could be enough, and it's not. You need to get that social contact with other people, also the reflection of other people, to really understand if your life is functioning well. You know, if you're only in front of internet and you're only doing things because of internet, you're going to be together with a lot of people, like on Facebook or, you know, on some other global network, right? So if you're on Facebook and you have 5,000 friends, it's fine, but you're still alone in your room, and that's wrong. Yes. Yeah, that's not being social. Yeah, yes. That's being social, but at the same time you're alone. There's something wrong with it. So in order to really celebrate culture and in order to really make a culture growing and steadily happening, you need to get together with other people. Like that you get the reflection, like that you communicate with other people, and it's all about communication. When you go and you dance and you do your solo, it's all about communication. Because you want that the audience understands what you're doing. If they don't understand it, they leave. And you don't want that.
Yes.
Yeah? And it's the same thing for painting, it's the same thing for rap, it's the same thing for anything. For anything. It's all about communication.
Yes.
You know, like maybe I haven't really cleared the question. You know, so back then, back then, the further we go back, the further you realize that we always had like little cells everywhere. You know, let's go way back when cars weren't even there. You know, you needed a long time to travel. You know, first trains, it took forever. I remember even like when we still had East and West Berlin, and I was coming from Berlin and I had to go to Munich or something like that. It took forever just to go to the, you know, we called it, man, what was the name again? Transitstrecke. Transit way, you know, through East Germany, where you were only allowed to drive 100 kilometers per hour, first of all, and secondly, also, you know, like in Berlin, you had to stop at the border, sometimes for 3-4 hours, and then when you were getting out again, you had to stop for 1 or 2 hours at the border. So already that, you know, taking a train or taking a car back in the days, yeah, it was always drama. It was so much work. Nowadays, yeah, man, nowadays. If you take a plane to, like, let's say, if I take a plane to Zurich and I go with one of them cheap airlines today, the taxi to the airport costs me more than the actual flight ticket. You know, that's the time that we're living in today. You know, so those are the possibilities. And if we're not sharing and if we're not communicating in a sense where we are socializing today, then the culture will be lost. But I'm really happy that it's happening the way it is. So back then it was all happening in your spot, regional, and you had to think a lot and you could only practice with your voice, and the sources that were coming from the outside was really rare. Sometimes somebody had a decent or a secret videotape from somebody else, so you could learn from that. Sometimes somebody came from the outside. It's like when I look at the whole style of graffiti in Berlin, it's all been influenced by J1 from Paris, for instance, because he was one of the first guys that came to Berlin. So you see, you know, that guy made it. Yeah. Yes. So he influenced the whole city, and the city grew with him. So, and that's how things happened back then. Today, it all changed with internet, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
And cheap airline tickets. When I started with hip hop, or basically when I started with breaking, it was only a few weeks later that we learned what hip hop was. Yes. And at first we got in touch through somebody who was, I don't know, who was close to the French Zulu Nation, right? There were some GIs that we had in our town, so we asked them, what's up with Zulu, what is it? And then they got us like the laws and regulations from New York. And in those laws and regulations, it stated so many things, and it was all about positivity. Yeah, that's why I like to really give tribute to Zulu Nation and for what they've done. For me, for my brother, and for a lot of people's lives. See, I'm from Germany. I'm from Berlin. And for us in Germany, we didn't have the same problems as they had in New York that we were dealing with. So when we read those laws and regulations, for us, it was very important that in order to be part of this hip-hop community, that we were not smoking, that we were not drinking, that we didn't take any kind of substances that would influence us, that would rather regulate us or anything. We were supposed to be in control of ourselves. So everything that's taking control of you might be bad for your life. Like I said before, Sly and the Family Stone, quote, somebody else's medicine might be poison for you. So now, really important, if it wasn't for Zulu back in the days, I would have done a lot of stupid things. A lot of stupid things. And Zulu kept me on a positive path. When I went to New York for the first time and I found out that it wasn't really all that, you know, like in New York when I asked them, like, what were you smoking? You smoke about your Zulu? They were like, well, you can smoke. You just can't smoke crack. I realized, you know, that their problems were different from our problems, you see, but it kept me away from a lot of stuff. Yeah? And also I respect the Zulus in New York, I respect the Zulus everywhere, because they tried to live a positive life, as positive as they could, and that's why within this culture it was very important to make Zulu happening. Right? Without Zulu Nation, we wouldn't have no hip-hop culture, I think. Now for you, knowing that Zulu has a total different status today, just think about your life, what you want to become, and where you want to go. And the more you control your life, and the more you think about leading your life positive, the easier it will be for you in the future. That's for sure. Just think about that and try to get control of your life. That's all.